Good afternoon. I'm Karl Shallowhorn. I'm the chair of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition and president and founder of Shallowhorn Consulting LLC. And on behalf of the coalition, I'd like to welcome you all to the second in our Facebook Live series, this time focusing on how to handle the stress associated with going back to work in the COVID-19 pandemic. As our nation grapples with these unprecedented challenges associated with the coronavirus, one of the major impacts has been in our collective mental health. Another is where our businesses stand in terms of reopening. With increased concerns about personal health, many people are expressing concern about returning to work. These thoughts often result in stress, which can be manifested in many ways, not the least of which can be anxiety. So today we're going to be exploring this topic with three local professionals. But before I introduce our panelists, here are a couple of housekeeping rules. Our program is for 1 hour. During the course of this time, if you have a question, please type it into the comment box and we'll respond accordingly. So today I'm joined by our three panelists who will each provide their own perspective on this topic. First, let me introduce Gulsum Silluzio from Horizon Health Services. Gulsum is a graduate of Canisius College and obtained her master's at the University of Buffalo in the School of Social Work. Gulsum has been with Horizon for 7 years and currently serves as the Director of Operations, overseeing 11 outpatient programs within Horizon. Gulsum has received her integrationist credentialing and has been trained in motivational interviewing, dialectical behavior therapy, trauma-informed care, cognitive behavioral therapy, schema therapy, work with personality disorders, and treatment of sexual offenders. Next, we have Lisa Coppola from the Coppola Law Firm. Attorney Lisa Coppola has 30 years of experience in personal injury, business, and employment law, including taking cases to verdict across New York State. Lisa owns a law practice as well as a garden design and construction company, The English Gardener in Buffalo. She serves on the board of the National Association of Women Business Owners with space in Washington, D.C., and she's a single mom by choice to her two amazing daughters. And finally, we're joined by Eric Galdys from ESC. Eric is an HR business partner at ESC. He brings with him 4 years of human resource experience in the restaurant industry, where he was responsible for the HR function. Eric oversaw compliance, employee relations, and safety across 62 locations throughout Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and New York. Eric's experience includes advising on safe work environment protocols to minimize workers' compensation claims, drafting action plans to ensure and promote company vision, assist with recruiting strategies to find the best in candidates, managing compliance and inquiries from government agencies like the DOL, DHR, and EEOC, employee onboarding and employee relations. Eric graduated from Canisius College with a Bachelor of Science in Business Management. Welcome, everybody. So I want to just thank you all for being here today to talk about this very important topic. And once again, for those of you who are in the audience, if you have a question for our panelists, please type it in the comment box and we will respond. So first of all, and this is a question for all of you, many of us have been living in what we call the self-imposed bubble for the past several months. So as a society and workplaces prepare to reopen, what are some of your concerns and the worries that you're seeing that people have as we face this reopening and living in this bubble and leaving this bubble that we're in right now? So why don't we start with Gulsum, with where you're from and your perspective as a mental health professional?
Sure. I think that this is a really tough time for everyone. Our world kind of got flipped upside down a few months back, and we kind of had our routine set in place. We went to work every day. We knew where our kids were going to be. We knew kind of what our day-to-day was going to look like, and everything kind of changed. So I think the idea of another change and the idea of returning to work is very overwhelming and scary for people. I think that, we're dealing with stressors that we've never dealt with before. So some people are experiencing maybe things they never have experienced before. So maybe some anxiety, so maybe some depression, maybe some stress. And I think that I really appreciate having this conversation because I think it's something that we don't talk about enough.
Well, certainly, Gulsum, and others to follow up with that. I mean, and I'm sure as you overseeing, I think it says 11 outpatient programs, right? That's quite a bit. So you work with your managers who then have staff. So you're hearing sort of like this collective, I guess, even angst or discomfort about what people are going through. So I'm sure you're hearing a lot of stories of your folks that are working with your agency to kind of transition back into this world. And like you said, I'm sure it's creating a lot of anxiety for folks.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of come into this conversation with two different hats on, right? So I was originally a mental health professional, and truly that is what I am at heart. And at the same time, I'm this director who works with managers and employees. And I think that, this is the conversation we're having right now. We're actually planning on bringing staff back on site and seeing some patients in person. And that's the conversations we're having day in and day out with our staff is, how are you feeling? What's going on? What do you need? And then the staff is, some of them are talking about it and some of them are not. And these are mental health professionals, right? So, it makes me wonder what's going on in other agencies and other industries and how much this conversation is actually coming up.
Right. So how about you, Lisa, from your perspective, what are you hearing and with your clients and the folks that and also with your other business, what are you hearing?
Right, exactly. And so I like to think about this time as one that is just simply unsettled, right? We've never been here before. We don't know what's exactly going to happen. And I hear that consistently from our employer clients as well. How do they keep up with the changing laws and guidance? How do they keep both their team and customers or clients safe? That's a primary concern of our employer clients. And then how do they adapt for things that are out of their control? Obviously, this virus is one of them, but then the overlay is all of these government directives, executive orders. Think about some of the businesses that still aren't able to open. And so that's what we're hearing a lot from our employer clients at the law firm. And I can tell you that same as Gulsum, with my teams, both here at the law firm and at the garden company, at the English Gardener, we're trying to have open and honest and transparent conversations about how people are feeling about the situation and what we as employers can do to sort of bridge that gap and be empathetic and sensitive to all of the real issues. Employers, after all, are people too, and they're facing these sorts of challenges as well.
So as you're experiencing this, from, like you said, from both sides, as both a business owner yourself, but also working very closely with businesses, you're experiencing it, from a number of different perspectives. So your overall sense, though, from what I hear you saying, is that there is just a lot of uncertainty.
That's right. Yep. As we say, it's very unsettled. And we do also represent employees as well as employers. And we're hearing almost the same sort of narrative across the board from everyone. I will say this. It seems to me everyone is trying to do their level best, right? That sense of we're all in this together. And I think the more we talk about these issues, the better off we all are, whether we're employers, employees, or customers walking into a business and wanting to make sure we're not exposed.
Absolutely. So Eric, how about you? So you're obviously, in a way you could almost call it an intermediary in terms of being an HR professional. So you work once again with businesses, but there's a lot of compliance that you work with and other regulations and things of that sort. So from your perspective, how are you seeing things?
I guess we come from a different perspective, more from a human aspect. So we work with a lot of local, medium, small, large businesses throughout Western New York. We try and communicate with the business owners to really keep the human aspect alive. Just because the business is there to achieve a goal of whatever they're trying to do, whether it's sales or manufacturing or distributing, their employees are humans, and you want to take their concerns into effect. So coming from the HR side and analyzing all the new laws and the regulations through the CDC, the Department of Health, all of the hoops that businesses have to go through, it's challenging for both the business owner because they're trying to keep their business afloat and surviving, but also ensuring that their employees are safe and they feel comfortable coming to work every day. So being able to help the business owners and understand the needs of employees and kind of let them think of outside the box approaches allows them to become more successful as business leaders and get more value out of their employees as the employees feel that their voice is being heard. And if there is a legitimate concern, they're not afraid to come to the business owner or the person of contact that they mostly deal with to express their concerns or frustrations, especially with COVID-19.
So, of course, the organizations that you work with obviously utilize you and ESC as a resource for many of these things. If I can ask, what about maybe those small businesses that don't have the resources like yours? Like, where could they go, or how can they get guidance?
They can always, there's a lot of reading material online through the CDC and the Department of Health on how to ensure they can keep their employees safe and best practices. ESC does do a bi-weekly webinar on different topics on how to assist managers or leaders of organizations who don't necessarily have the HR department available. But there's also, if they don't want to utilize those resources, my best recommendation would be just listen to your employees. Don't listen for the sake of listening, but listen for the sake of hearing what their frustrations or concerns are. Just because there's resources that could be available to them that you just might be thinking of that might help more than just that specific particular employee.
That's excellent. That's a very sound piece of advice, because I've heard it said many times that our country is run by small businesses. So that's terrific, and I'm sure Lisa, you being a small business as well, can relate to that. So let's go on to our next question, as far as just general advice that you would give for anyone who may experience some of the ideas of stigma. Remember, we're talking about reopening, but we're also talking about the stigma of mental illness. And Gulsum, you responded, in your original answer, saying that some people are experiencing things that they never had before. So how do employees deal with this going back into the workforce, or working in the workplace rather, and overcome maybe this fear of, whether it be talking to their employer or even their colleagues? Lisa, how about we start with you? How about your perspective?
Sure. I think that good employers encourage open and candid conversations. And the other thing that employers can do, from our perspective, is have in place very transparent protocols, policies, procedures. We can call them all these big P words, but really it's, how would you want to be treated if you were the employee? So be really transparent about having in place the regular and routine cleaning of high touch surfaces, have in place things like requiring masks, or ensuring that the office has appropriate social distancing, office, warehouse, retail shop, whatever kind of business we're talking about that's having its team come back to work on site. And of course, making it okay to go home or to stay home if you're feeling symptoms of illness, right? Sometimes there's this sense of, we have to go all the time. If I don't clock in on time or 5 minutes early, I'm gonna be viewed as the person who's the slacker. Employers can do their teams such a great service by being very clear that everybody's health and the public health is paramount right now. And I think that goes a long way to helping employees who might feel a unique and new challenge of feeling anxiety or being unsettled or feeling as though there's a stigma around their emotions. I think it will help them to understand and to appreciate that their employer is there for them and is willing to work with them to the extent necessary in order to make sure that everybody feels comfortable in the workplace.
Thank you. So Gulsum, how about you from the mental health perspective, behavioral health perspective, I should say? What would you say to folks who might be experiencing anxiety and maybe concerned about the stigma of talking to their employer? What would you encourage them to do?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I really just want to say that they're not the only ones feeling that way. Like, I just kind of want to remind people that you're not alone. We're all going through this together. And yes, your experience might be different than somebody else's, because our experience is our experience. And no one's going to 100% understand that. But you're not alone. We're all trying to deal with this together. And, if this is the first time that somebody's experienced some sort of, anxiety or stress or worry, that can actually be a little bit scary. I've never felt this before. I don't know what it is. What do I do with it? So, I guess I really, I really align with what Lisa was talking about, is just like, have conversations, right? Maybe the first step isn't with your employer. Maybe it's with, a family member or a loved one first, talk about what's going on, just kind of work through your own stuff. And then, maybe that'll help you feel a little bit more comfortable to then take the next step, which is talking to your employer, because honestly, they're not going to know what they don't know. Right. So, if we can't have that conversation openly, we're going to have a hard time figuring out what we can do as employers to help staff members out. And I think there's a lot of like variables that play along with this, right? Am I going to get sick is some of the worries, like what protocols are in place? Just like Lisa explained, we want agencies and companies to be pushing that out. But if they haven't, maybe part of the question is like, hey, what are you guys doing? How am I going to stay safe? What is this going to look like? Just to kind of ease some of that worry or stress that might be coming up for anybody that's trying to get into a place where, they're going back to work and feel a little bit more comfortable about the idea.
Sure. And like you said, the thing that I think the good point that you made there, Gulsum, is that we're all experiencing this, right? We're all experiencing this collective anxiety in one form or another if we are going back into the workplace. But it is about communication. I agree. It is about being able to say to your boss, your employer, hey, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through, and this is something that I need to acknowledge. And remember too, and I want to kind of maybe jump back to you, Eric, from the HR professional perspective, that people have rights. People have rights, am I correct? And can you talk a little bit about the person's rights?
Yeah, so the employee, well, first, before we could jump into that, I just want to help drive the point home that Lisa and Gulsum both made, that the feelings that you're having are very real, and that just because not everyone's expressing it doesn't mean that you're the only one that's feeling it, and that the open communication with both between the employee and employer is key, because the employer can't help resolve an issue unless they know what's going on. And the employee does have rights through of COVID, but it also the same way the employer does as well. The employee can then voice their frustrations or voice their anxieties. There are potential leaves that they may be eligible for through the FMLA Act and the disability, where they can have job protection if they have a previous diagnosis of a mental illness condition. They can ask their benefits department or person at their company that handles benefits to look into FMLA. FMLA allows the employee up to 12 weeks of job protection. It does go unpaid, but you may be eligible to apply for disability to get some funding, but the job protection is key, especially during these tough times. And also they can have that conversation with the employer of work accommodations. So if they can work from remotely, have that conversation of being able to remain working remotely. Or we have that conversation with the supervisor to make the accommodation of 50% in the office, 50% out of the office, or adjusting hours, especially with employees with children. If their children are home and they're unable to return or able to work during a certain time because the children are awake, ask for the supervisor, can they work from 8 to 12 and then jump back on at 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, something like that. Try and think outside the box with accommodations, just because we're in a new world. New things are occurring, and that we'll be able to assist with ensuring the business continues to go forward and also keeping employees safe and healthy.
Thanks. And so just to clarify, FMLA is the Family Medical Leave Act, correct?
Correct.
So we had our first question come through. And to remind folks, just real quickly, if you're just tuning in, I'm Karl Shallowhorn from the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, along with Gulsum Silluzio from Horizon Health Services, Lisa Coppola from the Coppola Law Firm, and Eric Galdys from ESC. Feel free to type your questions into the comment box, and we'll answer them. And our first question is, can someone be legally mandated to go back to work if they can work remotely? That's a real good question. So I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit, Eric, but can you clarify a little bit, maybe and Lisa, if you want to provide some input?
Sure, happy to. Generally speaking, employees can be mandated to come back to the work site, But remember, I said generally. And I say it that way because, like lots of things around the law, there's no absolutely 100% precise, clear answer that fits everybody. So you have to take each circumstance on a case-by-case basis. And what an employer would look at and an employee would look at in this situation is, does the employee have a disability, as Eric mentioned, that for which a reasonable accommodation might be able to be offered by the employer to allow that employee to work from home. You know, we lawyers aren't the funniest folks on the face of the earth, but I will tell you, employment lawyers for the past 5 or 6 months have said to each other, well, this issue of reasonable accommodations and working from home, for the most part, businesses have shown they can do it now. And so while it's not an across the board permission, in many cases, if an individual has a job that can be done remotely, and if the individual has a disability for which working at home or working off-site is a reasonable accommodation, they would be able to enter into what's called the interactive process with their employer, talk about their disability, provide substantiation about that disability, and request that they be permitted to work from home. And if all of those circumstances line up, the employer is obligated under the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, to allow that employee to have that accommodation of working from home. So while I can't tell you in absolutely every case, somebody can insist they get to work from home no matter what, because they've shown they can do it, there are certain instances where that is an appropriate accommodation. And we go back to the communication.
Yeah, so real quickly, so I'm going to get back to you, Eric, for real quickly. But so say, Gulsum, I'm a person, for instance, that's in that situation that the question was just referring to. What would I need to do to get that documentation?
Well, it really depends. It depends on the company's policy in some situations, but, you know, at our agency, and I can only kind of refer to kind of how our company does things, but we do assess patients and see what's going on. We see if there's a diagnosis, and a lot of times the doctor is usually involved as well to kind of figure out what's going on with that person. But, you know, with FMLA paper and PFL paperwork, we have the ability as mental health professionals to sign off on that documentation if there's some sort of need to take some time away from work based on symptomology that's being experienced by that person. So I think that's one of the reasons that it's so important to seek out help if something like this is going on, so that you can talk to somebody and see, is this something that maybe I would want to consider or I need to consider? And is this something that I can do right now? So yeah, I mean, it's something that we can definitely put together as mental health professionals, and a lot of agencies in the area have that ability.
That's great. Eric, do you have anything to add to what was just mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's really engaging with the employee and employer conversation, have the interactive conversation, as Lisa alluded to. You don't want, as an employer, you don't want to be going out asking employees, do you have a disability? Do you want to work from home? That really should be coming directly from the employee asking the employer for that accommodation or wanting that accommodation. It's really, then from there, you would want to make sure you have the medical documentation support, whatever mental illness that you may have, just so they have the documentation for the healthcare providers. The employer cannot guarantee that FMLA will be granted, but that is something that at least we can get the ball processed. The decision is really up at the carrier. Going back to the remote working, as much as everyone would love to work remotely, sometimes jobs can't. Sometimes there's functions of the job that you need to be in person, on site for certain things. So just because they're asking you to go work back in the office doesn't mean that necessarily has to be there every day. So if you want to, if you feel there's a need to or want to work from home and you feel like it's a safer due to some illness, mental illness, and you have the FMLA paperwork, have the discussion with the manager. Say, I'm willing to come in on X day because it's a heavy day that we need to get work done. But then the rest I would prefer to work from home. So think outside the box and work with the team to see what's best for the company as well as the employee.
Excellent. All good suggestions there. So once again, folks, if you are watching right now and have a question, feel free to type it into the comment box. We're here with Gulsum Silluzio from Horizon Health Services, Lisa Coppola from the Coppola Law Firm, and Eric Galdys from ESC. And I guess as a follow-up, and this was kind of referred to earlier, but let's take a deeper dive as far as employee safeguards. As we all know, I mean, every time you turn on the news or social media, there's talk of I choose to call it physical distancing, or there's the ways that the virus can be transmitted, or all those things go along with it. But as it goes into the workplace, what are some of the things that employers must be doing to ensure their employee safety? And do you know of any of these things that are your business that you work with right now are doing? So maybe Eric, if you want to tackle that one first.
Sure. One of the first things you would want employers should have in place is a health and safety policy. Essentially, it's a high level overview of what they did to preserve or create a safe environment, what they'll be continuing to do to preserve that safe environment, and policies in place to ensure that all employees are following CDC guidelines and safety guidelines. A couple of those policies could be if you're sick, stay home, or what to do if you do become ill with a potential COVID-19 symptom. General hygiene rules, even though everyone knows to wash their hands frequently, have it in writing and have people sign off on it just to drive that point home. Allow extra sanitizer throughout the building, just because if people walk, especially during high touch areas or through high touch areas. In that safety policy, if you travel on behalf of the company, have a travel policy. State what the expectation is and the steps they need to do in order to go to on-site or have people come into the building. If you have an EAP program, which is an employee assistance program, have that information detailed, as those are great resources for employees who are suffering through something that they don't necessarily want to address with their manager, and they have that extra resource. So be aware of that. Some other things that the employer should have is necessary PPE on site, which is personal protective equipment. Some of those things are masks, gloves, extra hand sanitizers, whether it's tape on the ground just for assisting with social distancing, or in our office, for example, at ESC, we had plexiglass barriers in between some of our desks just because we were within 6 feet. So we extended the desk, but also put in that barrier to ensure that we had a safer work environment. At ESC, we also, what we also recommend is that you have, when employers are reopening their business, to phase it in. Having everyone come in at once right away can create some extra anxieties that don't necessarily need to be there. Have a detailed plan and expresses who's coming in when and why, and be transparent. And the last thing is actually to go back to the general hygiene is put posters up. CDC recommendations on length of washing hands in the restroom, or when you should wipe high touch point areas down. All those things are key for employee safety, especially since the COVID is evolving and the document and we don't know everything about COVID-19 yet. So as long as employers can do these simple things, it helps ease of mind for the employee to ensure that the employer is doing their part to ensure that, for the best of their ability, they're creating a safe environment for those employees returning.
And I guess as a follow-up, Eric, in terms of, sometimes people travel out of town. When they come back, is it up to the employer to set their own policy as far as, the quarantining rules? I know, depending on whether it be the company or the industry, is it up to them to determine that? And how long they do it?
So the Governor Cuomo did put out an executive order stating on what, and especially with right now there's 31 states that are hot spots in the eyes of New York State. That's over 1 case out of, or 100 cases out of 100,000 cases, or 10% are coming positive, that New York State are not allowing into, or if you travel to those states, you have to quarantine for a minimum of 14 days. There are some exceptions for essential employees and depending on the length of stay. So I would recommend that you go to the governor's website to read the detailed executive order that states how long you need to quarantine and what the necessary steps you need to take in order to return back to the workplace if you do travel to one of those listed hotspots.
Excellent. Good. Yeah, I had heard the same thing too about the 31 states, was just actually announced yesterday, I believe. So We're not trending in a good direction, folks, but let's hope it turns around real quick. So anything else you want to add about that, maybe, Lisa, seeing that you're looking at it from maybe a law or legal perspective?
Sure. Eric's right. The governor has the quarantine order about travel to these so-called hotspots. But one point that I would make is that employers may have even more stringent policies in place about travel. For example, if there is a medical or healthcare provider that routinely works with patients that are particularly vulnerable, they may wish to have more strict policies or stricter policies. For example, their employees may not travel downstate to the New York City area, Long Island, Rockland County, Westchester County, where there has been more cases of COVID-19, and must quarantine for 14 days upon their return to Western New York. What I would say about travel policies, and frankly all policies, is employers must be certain to apply them consistently across the board. It's very, very important for employers to be consistent and not make exceptions to their policies. Policies are designed to provide standard operating procedures so everybody knows what the expectations are. And when an employer fails to impose a policy on a particular employee, for example, that can lead to claims of discrimination and other sorts of claims. So to answer your question directly, employers can have even stricter travel policies than the governor's executive order if there is reason to do so and if they apply those policies consistently across the board.
And actually, to your point, Lisa, I'm contracted with a healthcare organization that I'm going to be vacationing soon. I had to, first of all, let them know I'm going to be traveling out of town. But secondly, upon my return, I have to get a COVID test, which will need to be negative results before I can go back. So I have to self-quarantine until that time. So you're right, it can be more stringent than just the state regulations. So that's an excellent point that you made there. Mm-hmm. So essentially, we've been talking about a lot of these things with reopening, about some of the folks' concerns about return to work, some of the employers. Just so those who are tuning in, I'm here with Gulsum Silluzio from Horizon Health Services, Lisa Coppola from the Coppola Law Firm, and Eric Galdys from ESC. We're going to be replying to your questions, responding to your questions a little bit later as we get further into the program. So feel free to keep typing them in. We will respond. So I just want to ask then, if there's anything you can do, maybe Gulsum, about giving reassurance to any employees about going back to work, because of course, like I said earlier, and we've kind of said throughout the program, there's this collective anxiety that people are having. So maybe some self-care tips or ways that you can let people know that they can maybe manage their stress, their anxiety.
I think I mentioned this before, everybody is a little bit different. So it really depends on you as a person. But I think when it comes to maybe some stress, anxiety, maybe depression, that might be something that you're experiencing, I think it's important to understand what usually works for you or what helps you feel good in general. So, for some people, it might be taking a walk. It might be, having a good book that you're reading or taking breaks throughout the day. So, if it's your first day back at work, like maybe you schedule some time to get a break in and really separate yourself and make sure you're in a good headspace. And, for some people, it might be exercise, maybe every day you exercise a little bit or do some yoga to just kind of check yourself, slow yourself down, be a little bit more mindful and or release that extra energy you might be carrying around with you that's causing that anxiety or angst that you might be feeling. And I can't say it enough. Talking about it is probably one of the best things that you can do. So if you're holding it in and you feel like you're the only one and you're keeping it to yourself, it's going to feel so much more overwhelming than if you have somebody to talk to. So, I talked about, talking to your family members or friends and then to your employer. But the other thing that you can do is always reach out to a mental health professional, somebody that, specializes in behavioral health, get a counseling visit set up. get something set up with somebody that you can talk to that has maybe an outside perspective, that doesn't know you, that maybe you don't work with, just to kind of get some ideas of what might be helpful specifically for you. Because like I said, everybody is really different. And the access right now is wonderful. A lot of providers are offering telehealth services. So it makes it a lot easier if you're, struggling with childcare, trying to work around your job or whatever, trying to fit it in with everything that you have scheduled in your day. So, it might just increase the ability for us to be able to access that kind of service right now, especially during this time when everything may feel really overwhelming.
And as a quick, reference to what you just talked about there, Gulsum, there are many agencies in the area that are providing these kind of services. So with that, one great resource is the Mental Health Advocates of Western New York, which can provide information on virtually all of the treatment programs, support groups that are available. So I would strongly encourage people to access that information with MHA, and their number is 886-1242. So, but also a follow-up question, Gulsum, is there any advice you'd give on approaching your boss about how you're feeling? Because of course, you've already experienced anxiety. So what about the anxiety you're experiencing going to your boss?
I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult because, we're talking about stigma here, right? This is something that we all kind of feel like, should I bring it up? Should I not bring it up? And I just kind of want to say, bring it up, please just bring it up, right? Like we don't know what we don't know as employers, right? And so, maybe the thought or the option is to practice it with somebody beforehand. Something we do in some sessions with clients, if they're trying to figure out how do I say something or how do I approach this, we might have them practice with their counselor, or, you go in front of a mirror, practice what you want to say, how you want to say it. Write some stuff down. What's the points that you want to make? What do you want to make sure that you address in this conversation? Just coming into it prepared is going to be a little bit easier than trying to wing it. So have that all set up in your head and your mind, maybe write it down, whatever works for you. And that's probably going to be your best bet for approaching it with your boss.
Excellent. So, and then also goes from another follow-up, according to what your experience, have you seen an increase in terms of calls to say some of the hotlines like crisis services? Are you aware if there's an uptick in that kind of outreach?
I honestly don't have that information in terms of just like crisis services and some of the hotlines, but I do know what might be happening internally at our agency. There's just an increase of maybe just risk overall. So like suicidality, use of substances, lots of just stuff based on like the increased stress and anxiety and maybe depression that's going on right now. So I think families are feeling it, patients are feeling it, everybody's kind of feeling whatever's going on right now, just because, our norm is flipped upside down. There is no norm anymore, right? And I think that, that probably has resulted in more calls to these hotlines, but I don't have that data specifically to be able to share, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fine. And I think, I think even anecdotally, from my experience, because I've done some work with crisis services as far as just conversations and so forth. I know Jessica Pirro, the CEO, quite well. And, from what I understand, they are definitely feeling, a lot of the collective traumas and people, what they're going through in terms of just, what they're hearing from folks. So, like yourself, I don't have specific numbers, but there does seem to be an increase. But what I will say, though, is if someone is experiencing say some general emotional difficulty, maybe not severe crisis, but maybe just in terms of just needing someone to talk to, there is the New York State Emotional Support Helpline. That number is 1-844-863-9314. And let me repeat that again, 1-844-863-9314. So that number you can call just if you are experiencing any difficulty as far as just manage your emotions and just need to talk to someone about what's going on, and if it's not a crisis. So we have another question. How can employees access mental health services for employers access mental health services for the employees? And then, so maybe we'll go with that with Eric rather.
Okay. Companies can work with employee assistance programs. Some of those include Avicor and Child and Family Services. So you'd want to get in contact with those companies directly to try and set up assist or that resource for your employees. It's a great selling point as well, just because everyone nowadays are in a high high stress work environment is with pre-COVID or without even COVID involved. So having those resources available for any issues, whether it's anxiety, stress, or if you have dependency issues, where you're going through a tough time at home in the home life, these resources are available for you to help work through those issues. They are confidential, so you don't necessarily have to tell your employer that you're using it. And it's great that you don't necessarily need to feel that that your employer needs to know your personal business unless you want to tell them that.
Right, and of course, EAP services are available for not just individual, but for those under one roof. I guess that's to say.
Correct. Yes, it's not necessarily for the employee, but also for the employee's family members that are enrolled in that program.
Excellent, excellent. Anything else anyone wants to add about that? Question?
I would hope that, employers across the board are making that accessible for their staff, because sometimes staff doesn't know that that's even an option. So, especially during this time, that would probably be something that would be helpful, just to kind of put it out there. Hey, if you guys need anything, here's our EAP, or, here are your resources that you have available, so that you can go ahead and reach out whenever it feels right to you, so that, maybe the employer doesn't have to ask and say like, hey, what is there available? Even though we should be having that conversation if we can.
And how about Lisa? How about anything for you?
Yeah, I would say employers that aren't large enough to be able to provide EAP services can always hook up their employees with their health insurance customer service representatives. All of the health insurers in Western New York have very robust resource pages. And of course, the letstalkstigma.org/resources page is a great page to refer employees to, of course, free of charge, and just a compilation of reliable, credible resources for employees or anyone in our community to turn to for support.
So, and of course, since we're talking about the Let's Talk Stigma page and website, you could also go to letstalkstigma.org to take the pledge and stigma. And we'll talk a little bit about that more at the conclusion of our program. But so really right now, we're looking at a situation where, like I said before, collectively as a nation, and even throughout the world, we're all going through trauma. And so maybe, Gulsum, do you want to maybe break that down a little bit as far as, what trauma is, and maybe how it manifests and how it affects people in situations like this?
Sure. So trauma can mean a lot of different things. It depends on the person, what they consider to be traumatic and what impacts them emotionally and mentally. But in general, just kind of speaking to generalities right now, it's something that's impactful that happens in somebody's life that causes them to feel emotional or mental distress. And that could impact them in their life and their functioning in some way, shape, or form. So, for some people that manifests in a way where it might cause sleep disturbances. It might cause them to feel jumpy. It might cause them to feel, uneasy throughout the day when they don't usually feel uneasy. It can look like a whole lot of different things depending on the person. But really, when you notice that these things are coming out of nowhere, and it's probably like right after something impactful happens, then it could be a trauma response, right? And us as, human beings, our bodies are meant to respond in a way to protect ourselves. And it's actually our brain and our mind and our body just figuring out a way to, how do I make myself as safe as humanly possible, right? So if I'm feeling unsafe, a lot of times our body's going to naturally react in such a way to try and make it as safe as humanly possible. So that might result in like those sleep disturbances or things that you might feel throughout the day that make you feel jumpy too, because that's just our natural body trying to say, oh, okay, I need to figure out what I need to do to calm myself down or feel safe in some way, shape, or form. So remember to kind of get back to the basics, what things make you comfortable, what things make you calm, and what things can bring you down to the level where you do feel safe and what makes you feel safe day to day. So hopefully some of that might be helpful if somebody is experiencing some sort of trauma response.
So, okay, that's really good to know, because I think sometimes people hear the word trauma, they don't know really what it means. So Eric, this is for you, and this is once again, we kind of touched on this earlier, but let's elaborate. So, and maybe even Lisa, I don't know if you want to have a comment, but can someone really work from home while they're quarantined? I mean, we talked about some different, Eric, you talked about the out of the box kind of opportunities, but can they work from home? I mean, what's a person looking at?
So yeah, someone can work from home if they are under a quarantine order, whether it's because it's a doctor's order saying you tested positive and need to wait for the 14 days to go through, or if you may have come in contact with someone and you are waiting for those test results. So through the CARES Act, which was a federal act that came through in March of 2020, there's the FFCRA, which allows employers to still pay those employees if they are out on quarantine or they're quarantining for X amount of time. So if an employer or employee does test positive and the symptomatics or the condition that allows them to work, they are eligible to continue to work from home. Obviously, if the employee is feeling very ill or they can't physically work from home, then they would not. But once they start feeling better, they are eligible and able to work from home, yes.
And Lisa, do you have anything else to add?
Eric's absolutely right. Quarantine just means you have to stay in place for, in this case, 14 days. If you're asymptomatic and you're capable of working and the work can be done from home, there's no reason why the work couldn't be done during that time period.
Okay. And as a follow-up, okay, so Lisa, how about this one? Here's one for you. So what are concerns maybe for someone like yourself as a business owner with things getting started back up? What are some things that are on your mind that maybe keep you up at night?
So what we hear all the time is this desire to get back to normalcy. We hear it from employer clients. We hear it from employee clients as well. From the small or medium or even large size business employer perspective, Reopening New York is a must-view website. Eric did such a great job of talking about cleaning protocols and safety protocols. And in addition, every business that's reopening in New York State must follow the reopening guidance, must complete a safety plan, and must then follow the safety plan. And I say that with great importance because there's not automatically somebody knocking at the door to make sure you're doing this. But the state has made it very easy for members of the public, including employees, to report a business for not complying with that safety plan. So businesses have to complete it, have to post it, have to follow it. That's very important. Another really practical consideration our business owners and managers are grappling with is the issue of children. Right? I don't think it's come up in this conversation today, but it's a very real challenge. We have many, many, many workers, men and women, but the research is telling us particularly women employees are burdened with those childcare responsibilities because daycare is closed. The typical summer camps, the overnight camps aren't even allowed to operate this summer. And who knows about whether school will open in person or remotely. So the issue of employees being entitled to leave under both state and federal law. The federal law is called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And if a child is unable to go to school or be cared for, parents do have the right to have a certain amount of job protected leave. And so what employers are looking at is how do we get the work done? And some of those out of the box solutions where if work is able to be done remotely, we might be able to get it done at odd hours of the day or night. But if work can't be done remotely, let's say I'm running a manufacturing plant, somebody can't make the widgets at home. Well, then that employer is concerned about how do I meet my contract obligations? How do I get my business continuing to operate or face the unthinkable, closing the business or bankruptcy. These are very real concerns for business owners who, after all, are our neighbors and our friends across the community.
Thank you, Lisa. So, Eric, I got another question for you that's maybe a little bit more specific that came up. Now, with people returning to work, some employers may be requesting that their staff employees provide information, whether it be regarding disability or even sexual orientation, things that might raise some red flags. What is your reaction to that?
My recommendation would be not for that. Those employers not to ask those questions. Those are protected by ADA, and the EEOC can come after you depending on how you take that information and how you apply it. So my recommendation for that employer is to not ask if any employee has any disabilities or any medical health issues. That if the employee feels comfortable of disclosing that to the employer, then you would engage in that interactive conversation to determine the next steps. Otherwise, I would not ask that. I would recommend that a business owner to not ask those questions.
So as I was going to ask, so I actually meant to ask that the other way around. What if someone is being asked to provide that information by an employer? How does the employee handle it?
I would recommend the employee does not answer this kind of refuses to provide that information. They don't need to provide it. That there's nothing that information would impact their day-to-day business. As long as the employee feels safe and comfortable, the employer doesn't need to know if there's any underlying medical conditions or any underlying mental health issues. If it becomes apparent and the employee feels that there's an issue, I would again recommend that they would reach out to their direct supervisor or human resources department directly, but not have that employer seek out that information.
Okay. And I think, in that case, obviously, we want to make sure that people understand what the rights are. And you talked about the ADA earlier, but also the right to not disclose is important. So that's really critical. Anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
Well, I would say generally, both under federal law and under New York state law, we have a body of law that protects employees and others in other situations from discrimination based on what's called a protected class or a classification. And the ones that we hear about most often are things like age, disability, race. But there are many, many protected classes, particularly under New York state law, which is more expansive than federal law. And so your comment, your observation, Karl, about employees arming themselves with information is a great observation. Also, employers need to arm themselves with information, because often we see in situations where unsophisticated employers, right? If I make blue bathtubs, I'm an expert at blue bathtubs. I'm probably not an expert at employment law, but I'm running this great blue bathtub business, and I might maybe inadvertently ask a question that walks me into an area of discrimination. So what we encourage employers, particularly smaller businesses, to do is to work with somebody like Eric's company, or have a good attorney on your speed dial to make sure you have that support around you. Attend those free webinars that ESC gives. Read the blog that my law firm puts out on employment information. Try to get up to speed on these things, because even sometimes innocent comments or questions can lead to liability exposure.
Thank you. And so just so those who are watching know, the Let's Talk Stigma join the conversation page at letstalkstigma.org has information. We can actually provide information and presentations around myth, stigma, the ways that people can, whether it be learn themselves or organizations can learn about this. We also encourage businesses to become organizational members. Of course, we have right now over 60 organizational members that have joined us in our cause to end stigma. So you can do that by going to letstalkstigma.org, and then you can click on the membership form tab, and therefore fill out the form, and one of our representatives will be back in touch with you in order to do that. So I think one thing that we want to acknowledge is that there is stigma. There is a lot of underlying causes that add on to what people are experiencing with anxiety. So, but the stigma just simply contributes more. And we know we want to help people with that. We want to let people know that there is help available in our resources. So we only have about 6 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is maybe have each of you provide, maybe 90 seconds or so, give or take, of closing comments, maybe just to wrap things up from your own perspective. So why don't we start with you, Gulsum?
Sure. I really appreciate being here. I think that this is a really important conversation to have. So I just kind of wanted to start with that. So a few things. I feel like we touched on a lot of different topics, and I'm hoping that these are all helpful to people. But I guess I just want to say, in terms of just stigma and the conversation about mental health and these symptoms, that you're not alone. You're not the only one experiencing this. And I think some things that we can do as people that might be experiencing these kinds of symptoms is try really hard not to judge yourself. I think sometimes we're our worst critic, right? We think that there's something wrong with us. We think that, we're crazy for some reason because we're experiencing these kinds of symptoms. And that's absolutely not true. We're human. We're experiencing something that's difficult. We're experiencing a major change. We've never had COVID happen in our lives before. This is something completely different. So just acknowledge the fact that, that might be causing this stress and this overwhelming feeling that you might be experiencing, and that it's okay to talk about it. And so, if you're wondering where to start, or where to go first, I think we talked a lot about talking to family, friends, your employer. Another spot you can go to is, your primary doctor. That might be a good spot to start. That person, you might have a relationship with that person. Maybe talk to them first, like, what's going on? What am I experiencing? Just to kind of understand, and get, maybe your bearings right of, what is this and what can I do? And then hopefully you can have that conversation with your employer to figure out, like, what resources do I have available? There's a lot of talk about the AP. A lot of these companies offer, multiple services. You can get in, talk to somebody and have some relief. And I'm hoping that, this really helps just empower some of you to be able to open up. Me personally, I have some anxiety, and I try and talk about it when I can. And I'm hoping that, me sharing that a little bit can help other people to maybe come forward and share, their experiences as well.
Thanks, Gulsum. How about you, Eric? Any closing comments?
Sure. Just to kind of piggyback on Gulsum, talk about your anxieties and stressors with your employer. Just because that no one else is saying it doesn't mean they're not feeling it. Being open with the employer, just because the employer is human too. And not only are they focused on that one employee's safety, but they have to focus on every employee's safety. And if you're customer facing, all the customers that walk through that building, and they're going a mile a minute to ensure safety, but they might not think of everything. So have that two-way communication with your employer. Don't be afraid to speak out. I know it could be intimidating, and that because stressful and anxiety alone, but it's better to know or have your employer know that you're going through something, so they can understand and try and help you the best they can to ensure that you feel safe and you feel comfortable returning back to work and being around your coworkers for the future.
Thank you, Eric. And Lisa, you get the not the last word, but one of the last words.
Sure. So, we all know change is stressful, and it's anxiety producing, and that's what everyone is going through throughout this pandemic. And so I'll speak to the leaders out there, the business owners and the managers, the supervisors. What I would say to you is, because change and stress can be a huge distraction in the workplace, take ownership of the care of your people. And the way you do that is you remain attentive that your employees, your team is watching you. And so try your best to be transparent about what you're doing to keep your team safe, to keep all the folks who visit or come to your workplace safe. And if you can try to be transparent about their job security, because we know that employees across the board, across the country, are worried about that. And so I would say to leaders out there, try to inspire a we'll get through this together mentality. We've found, certainly at our businesses and among our clients, that that sort of positivity, that sort of we can do this, even though it might be a struggle or a challenge, that approach goes a long way.
Thanks, Lisa. So I want to thank all of you. But first of all, before we get into all that, I want to just remind our viewers, if you're with a business or organization that would like to learn more about the Anti-Stigma Coalition and join our cause and become an organizational member, go to our website at letstalkstigma.org and click on the tab for members, and you'll be able to fill out the membership form. We are able actually to do presentations by Zoom. So we're able to present just like we are now. We'll just take a few moments, say out of a staff meeting, or if you want us to do a presentation, we're available. So that is available to you. And you would just reach out to us, send us a message through our Facebook page like you're on right now, and we'd be happy to engage with you. So also, I just want to thank, of course, all of you for being with us today. I want to thank Gulsum Silluzio from Horizon Health Services, Lisa Coppola from the Coppola Law Firm, and Eric Galdys from ESC. And I'd also like to thank the folks behind the scenes, the Telescope Creative Group, and also Carol Doggett from the Mental Health Advocates, who kind of was working behind the scenes as well with getting us prepared. So on behalf of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, I'm Karl Shallowhorn. Be well.